call is now being recorded.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Share my screen. Okay, so my name is Meredith Miller. Welcome to the Must Have Backpacking Gear. I'm the lead guide at Blaze Adventure Tours, and I'm really excited to be here today and share this presentation with you guys. I'm really pumped to be a part of the Girls Who Hike Virginia community. I think it's awesome. I love to hike. I have for years, but I've had a really hard time meeting other women who like to do the same sorts of things. So it's really cool to see all of your guys' posts, see all the hikes you're going on, see all the meetups. I'm from a pretty technical background and in engineering. And then I also, my biggest hobby is like endurance sports. So running, triathlon, hiking, things like that. And I've had both of those things are very male dominated, and it's been hard to meet other women who like to do the same sorts of things. So I'm really excited to be here and present this for you guys. And I hope I get to meet some of you at our backpacking trip this summer. A little bit about who we are. So my husband Dave and I were both really big into backpacking and bikepacking. That's kind of how we got together. We have a shared love of adventure and human-powered travel. And we've done backpacking and bikepacking all around the US and around the world. The main reason we started Blaze Adventure Tours was because we come back from these trips and our friends would be like, oh, your trip looks so cool. I wish I could do something like that. Or how did you do that? I don't even know where to start. And so with Blaze Adventure Tours, we wanted to be able to make that more accessible, to remove barriers and provide stepping stones for people to pursue those kinds of experiences and be able to have the same stories to tell that we did. And so far it's been really fulfilling, and it's been really cool to be a part of it. A little bit about what we do. So we have a few like open to the public bicycle tours, but we're kind of moving more towards custom backpacking and bikepacking trips. There's a couple reasons for that. The main one just being that it's really fun to see people come to us with an idea and just not know how to execute it, and then be able to build this amazing experience for them. And so we like those experiences to be unique. Most every trip that we do, we've scouted ourselves and we've vetted all the places that we're having you go. And we know it's just going to be a really cool experience. And a lot of the times it's off the beaten track. So it's not stuff that's easily found by Google search and things like that. And then we like to bring together small groups, generally 6 to 12 people we find works really well. We just find that this fosters a really cool, inclusive environment, and that people leave the trip closer because of it. They leave with lifelong friendships, which is super cool. And then the biggest thing that I really enjoy is just being a part of watching you guys push your boundaries, get outside your comfort zone. One of the coolest things about these trips is that at the end, a lot of the times people are like, wow, I really didn't think I could do something like that. Or I'm so proud of myself, and to bear witness to that and be a part of it, and help provide an environment for people to be able to do that is really cool. So what is backpacking? It's a form of human-powered travel by foot where we carry all of our stuff in a backpack, and we're going to kind of go over what that stuff is, what those specific belongings are in the rest of this presentation. So I could talk for days about all the different things that you could bring on a backpacking trip, but since we only have an hour tonight, we're going to mostly just highlight these things here that are in yellow. You got to have your backpack, of course. You have to have something to put your water in and a way to filter your water. You need to have a headlamp because you don't want to be navigating in the dark. You should always have a first aid and emergency kit, and stove and fuel. Some people, if they're only going out for like one night, might not bring a stove and fuel. They might just pack some already made food in. If you're on a longer trip, you're probably going to want one so you can have hot food. And even if you're not planning on using it to cook, sometimes it's good to have just in case of an emergency if you need hot water or something like that. Your mess kit. So that's going to be basically everything besides the stove and fuel that you need to prepare your meals. So a pot, utensils, plates, bowls, mugs, things like that. Your tent, sleeping bag, liner, pad, and pillow. Those are all super important. Some really ultralight people will go without a pillow, but I am not one of those people. And then your hiking shoes, also very important. We'll go over the different kinds in here in a little bit. Weather appropriate clothing. You got to try to look up the weather as close to where you're actually going to be hiking as you can, and always try to be over prepared rather than under prepared. Like even if it doesn't say it's going to rain, I always recommend bringing a rain jacket, things like that. Your hygiene and toiletry supplies. So it's a little bit different when you're in the backcountry versus if you're camping at a established campground. So we'll go over that. Any wildlife supplies. So if you're going to be in bear country, you want to make sure you have a bear canister or know how to hang a bear bag. If you're worried about bears, you might also want bear spray or bells on your backpack or something like that. You want some way to know your location and where you're going. So this could be a paper map. This could be like a Garmin watch. It could be a traditional compass, or it could be an app on your phone that has the route downloaded, like Ride with GPS or All Trails. Those are really, really cool to have. And then sun protection and bug protection, you'll always want to bring. Depending on where you're going, you might need a specific kind of bug protection. You might want to look into treating your supplies with like permethrin if there's going to be ticks or things like that. So just kind of do your research and try to be aware of that. And then you always want to bring a knife. It can be used for a lot of different things, and you never know when you're going to need it. And then you got to have your food, your meals and snacks, of course. So some optional items, but recommended just based on our experience, having some other way to charge your devices if they run out of battery, especially your phone. You can bring a solar charger. You can hang it on your backpack as you're walking, and it will charge up. You can use it later that night to charge a backup battery bank, to charge your phone directly, to charge your watch, whatever it is. An emergency satellite communicator. So that's like a Garmin InReach. There's a few different brands now, but Garmin is one of the originals. That can be used just to text people. Like a lot of thru hikers will get one to communicate with their families when they don't have reception, let them know that they're okay, where they are, stuff like that. But it can also be used as an SOS device. So if you're in an emergency and you need help, you can just hit an SOS button and they'll get help to you as soon as they can. And then trekking poles, they're kind of a preference based. I know a lot of people who use them on all hikes, on all terrain, on all durations. I tend to only use them if it's going to be like a really long day, if I have a really heavy pack, or if I know there's going to be like really steep or rocky terrain, I'll usually bring them. And then if you need recommendation for trekking poles, I highly recommend Trail Buddies. They're not super lightweight or anything, but they're very reasonably priced. And I've had mine for years and taken them on long trips overseas and things like that. And they've held up really, really well. And then gaiters, those are just little covers that go over your shoes. That's just to keep like mud and dirt from getting inside your shoes. Camp shoes, camp clothes. Some super light people will bring just like one set of clothes and that's it. I tend to bring a set of camp clothes and a set of camp shoes, just so I don't have to wear the same thing all day, every day. A camp towel. So those are like usually microfiber and they fold up really small. That's good if you want to like be able to get in a stream to kind of rinse off and then be able to dry yourself off. A buff, which is just those like lightweight headbands. Those can be used to keep sweat from getting on your face, or they can be used to keep your ears warm. They can also be used if it's like really cold and you want something over your face and you can breathe through them, which is kind of nice. Dry bags, that's for packing your gear inside your backpack. They're completely waterproof, which is really nice, and they usually compress down pretty small. And then camp chair, kind of a luxury, but it might be nice to have for a longer trip if you're tired of like sitting on the ground or something. And there are some brands that are small enough to actually fit in your backpack or like in one of the outside pockets, which is pretty cool. So we're going to start off with how to choose a backpack. Number one thing is the capacity. You need to know basically how long you're going, and that will help you decide how many liters you need for your pack size. The size of the pack, they generally come in extra small to extra large. Your frame type, so that's internal versus external. Most modern backpacks have an internal frame, but you can still find external frames out there if that's something that you really like. The ventilation system, you basically just want to make sure that your pack has one. That's just to keep you from getting super, super sweaty. It helps airflow between your back and the back of the pack. And then storage and access. So how many pockets there are, where they are, things like that. Waterproofness. Most packs are made of a nylon material, but they generally recommend having a rain cover. And some packs will come with it and others don't. You might have to buy it separately. You just want to make sure you look into that and make sure you have one before you set off on your trip. And then hydration access. So almost all packs these days will have some sort of reservoir compartment to put a bladder if you want that. But if you don't like that and you want bottles, you want to make sure that it has pockets big enough for your bottles and that they're easy to reach. So capacity is based on basically the duration that you're going to be out there. This is a general rule of thumb. It's not exact. It depends on how heavy you pack and how lightweight you want to be. For a weekend trip, generally 30 to 50 liters is good. So that's about 1 to 3 nights. For a multi-day trip, 3 to 5 nights, you're going to want 50 to 70 liters. And then for a longer hike, like more than 5 nights, you're going to want 70 or more liters. And there's obviously some give there. The picture here is taken from a 6-night backpacking trip that I did. And that the blue pack is a 58 liter. And that worked out pretty well for me. It was pretty full. I didn't have a lot of room, but I was glad that I went with that because I knew if I packed a bigger pack, I just would have brought more stuff and it would have been even heavier. So you kind of got to, there's some trial and error with that and you'll figure out what works for you. This is an image of the pack that I have, the 58 liter Osprey. A few features that it had, just things to look out for on generally all packs. You want to remove, well, most packs will have a removable brain, and it's up to you whether or not you want to use it. I like to have it because it has this pocket here that's really easy to access, and it holds a lot of stuff. So I usually will put like my headlamp in there for easy access, maybe some snacks, my phone or a phone charger, maybe things like that. And then you also usually have these front pockets and side pockets as well. This pack has a nice hole here so that you can kind of reach into the side pocket, but it's kind of depending on how your pack is set up. This one, because it was very full, these straps here made it difficult to fit anything large like a water bottle in this pocket. Just things to look out for. It wasn't a big deal for me because I had a water bladder. And then this is the ventilation system that I was referencing. The Osprey pack has a really cool mesh system. It might be available on other brands. I'm not 100% sure. I don't know if it's like patented by Osprey, but I really, really enjoyed that. I didn't have any issues with like getting too hot, and I thought it was really comfortable. But if it doesn't have a mesh back like this, some packs will have like padding on each side and then have like an air channel up the middle to help try to allow air to run between the back of your backpack and your back. You basically just want to make sure that it has a decent ventilation system. It doesn't have to be this exact setup. And then for some of the adjustments, Almost all backpacks will have these low lifter straps. Those are up at your shoulders. They're really easy to adjust on the go. If you're going up or down an incline, you may want to adjust that because it adjusts where the weight is sitting, basically, whether it's closer to you or further back. And then generally on like regular terrain, you want it to be about at like a 45-degree angle. And then this adjustable chest strap, this is another easy one to adjust on the go. It's just to keep it in close to your chest so it's not moving around a lot. You want to make it tight enough that it's comfortable. You don't want it to be too tight so it's like restricting your movement, or if you're like huffing and puffing going up a hill, you need to be able to breathe well. And then the other big one is this waist strap here. This, you want to check the product specs when, especially if you're buying a backpack online, to make sure that that's going to be big enough or small enough. And then you also want to check this torso length here. That's going to be another big one. So if you're buying a backpack online, make sure you check the product specifications and take those measurements. If you can, I highly recommend going to a store in person and having someone fit you. Having someone on the outside looking at it who knows what they're doing is really helpful. And then generally, there are unisex packs. I would say if you're smaller framed, I would definitely recommend looking for a women's specific pack, just because they'll generally fit better. And then the last thing I wanted to point out on this pack, because I was kind of missing them when I was using it on that longer trip, was that a lot of times these waistbands will have pockets in the waistband, so it makes it really easy to access. My other pack, that's a smaller one that I've used on shorter trips, does have that, and I'm able to put like my GoPro in it, so it's really easy to access. I can put some snacks in it, just really great. Like a credit card or something if I need to easily access that. So that's something to look out for too, is a lot of times backpacks will have these waist pockets, but this one does not. And next topic, which is arguably the most important, is a water filtration system. Even if you're just going for a day hike, I recommend having something with you, because you never know if you get stuck and you need to filter water, you're really gonna wish you had that if you don't pack it. But it is important to know where you're going and what to expect. There's a lot of information on the internet out there. All Trails can be helpful. Other websites like Hiking Upwards is a good one. People who have actually hiked the route, especially for backpacking routes, will make note usually of where you can get water. Sometimes they'll even say like maybe what filtration method they used or what not to bring. So we'll kind of go over that in a little bit more detail now. We carry for our trips, for our group trips, I will carry a big 3-liter gravity filter, and that's mostly to use when we get to camp. So I can fill it up in the stream and then just hang it from a tree, use gravity to have the water run through the filter. And then it usually comes with like a clamp so that you can stop water from coming, and then you can turn it back on when somebody needs it. It's really nice to have for a group because 3+ liters is a lot of water. You don't really want to be carrying that around all the time, but it is nice, especially if you're at a campsite and you don't want to have to be running back and forth to the water. UV is another option. Not as common, I would say, mostly because it does require pre-treatment if it's really turbid or muddy water. So it's good to have if you know you're going to have clear water, but it does need like replacement batteries and things like that. But you don't have to replace the filter, which is nice. The kind that I use most often is this Katadyn BeFree. It's a bottle or squeeze filter. They're basically the same thing. It's really good for on the go. You can drink straight from the nozzle. One thing to keep in mind is if you get this particular filter, the first time you use it, especially, or if you haven't used it in a long time, you might have to squeeze water through the filter for like pretty hard for, I don't know, 30 seconds or so to get the filter wet and actually get water coming out the nozzle. First time I used mine, I didn't realize that. And I was very low on water. And I thought that for some reason the filter was broken or wasn't working, and I almost panicked. But luckily that wasn't the case. And then the Sawyer squeeze filter on the bottom here is another option. These filters will actually like hook up to a smart water bottle, those tall skinny bottles, which is kind of cool. But they also come with these reservoir packets. I just like the BeFree more because I think it's easier. It packs up really small, and it's just really easy to use. Probably heard of Life Straw. It's another good option, especially in an emergency. They came out with the straws that you can drink straight from the water source, which is nice. That being said, they don't come with any sort of reservoir or anything like that. But they do make, Life Straw has expanded significantly, and they make other kinds of filters now, like bottle and squeeze filters as well. And last but not least is the oldie but a goodie iodine. This is not one that I would use as like my primary source of filtration. I think this is one that's kept in an emergency kit. They'll generally come with this potable aqua bottle, and that's the actual iodine. And then they'll also come with these neutralizing tablets, which is supposed to help with the smell and the odor. It is kind of unpleasant, so it's good to have the neutralizing tablets, but I would also recommend having some sort of like water flavoring, like Crystal Light or something like that, to help mask that flavor as well. But one important thing to note is that it does not protect against certain protozoa. So like Cryptosporidium is a big one. If you're going to be in an area that's like full of livestock, like sheep or cattle or something like that, a lot of areas like in the Scottish Highlands, there's a lot of sheep. In the Alps, there's a lot of cows and things like that. That Cryptosporidium can be spread through animal feces. So you probably don't want to use just this kind of filtration if you're in a situation like that. I would use something else that could actually filter out that protozoa. And then first aid. Generally, I just recommend buying a pre-made kit. You could build your own, but it's easy to forget things, and it's really nice to just have it all in one pre-made pack. And they do come in like multiple sizes, so depending on how long you're going, you might need a bigger one. And they also generally come with a manual that explains what everything is, how to use it, which is really nice to have, especially if you're in an emergency, to have something to refer to like that. But I would recommend, if you do get a pre-made one, open it up, make sure you familiarize yourself with what's inside, that you know what it is and generally how to use it, what its purpose is, just so that you have that knowledge in the event that you do need it in the backcountry. And then also very important is not to forget a pet first aid kit if you are hiking with your dog. I hike with our dogs almost every single day. There is some overlap between human and pet first aid kits, but there is some more specific things in a pet first aid kit that's good to have. So if you are hiking with your dog, I highly recommend getting a pet specific one. And depending on how long you're going, I think this same brand makes a combined kit for you and your pet. So you would just need one, which is kind of nice. And then in your emergency kit, these are things that I like to have, even if I'm just going out for a day hike, because you just never know what could happen. You want spare water filtration. So for example, like the iodine pills or Life Straw, something small like that. Spare batteries, like a charged up battery bank for your phone. Compass is always great to have. Fire starter, usually like waterproof matches is a great option to have, because everybody knows how to use them, and if they do get wet, it's not the end of the world. You can also have one neat little thing is you can like soak cotton balls in Vaseline, keep them in a little glass jar, and those are super flammable. So if you have that and a waterproof match, you can pretty easily start a fire, and you don't have to rely on finding like kindling out in the woods. Paracord, that's really good to have in a lot of situations. It's really strong. You can use it to hang a bear bag. You generally want like 10 to 20 feet for it to be useful. An emergency blanket. So those are just those little aluminum blankets. They fold up really, really small. If you've ever run like a half marathon or something like that, they've probably given you one at the finish. You could just keep it and reuse it. So those are really lightweight, really small. They can fit like in anywhere in your backpack. So there's really no excuse not to have one. Whistle. A lot of times backpacks will have whistles built into the chest strap that I showed earlier. That being said, it's not the worst thing in the world to have an extra. And that's really good just to be able to call for help if you need it. A permanent marker is really handy to be able to track like bug or snake bites or infections and things. Hopefully you would never be out without help long enough for it to be a problem. But if for some reason you were in an area where you got like bit or a cut or something starts to get red, use that permanent marker to like circle it and keep track of where the redness is. And that will allow you to see if it's spreading and just like how serious it is. And it's when first responders do get to you, that's a really helpful thing to have. And then hand and foot warmers. So just like the things that you put in your ski boots or your gloves, those can be really, really good to have. Okay, stoves and fuel types. There's a lot of nitty gritty details I could get into about this, but generally you just want to look for a backpacking style stove. We use and recommend canister style stoves. So we have one of each of, well, we have a few of each of these, but these different kinds. This just screws on to the gas canister and it's leak proof, which is really nice. And you can put a pot on top. This is a Jetboil. We specifically use this for water boiling because it boils very, very quickly. This orange kind of image here, it's normally gray, and when it starts to boil and it's hot all the way to the top, that will turn orange, and that's how you know it's done. It's really hard to cook food in a Jetboil though, so that's why we recommend also having some other, especially if you're out for a long time and you want a variation of meals, having two stoves, one that you can use a regular pot with to cook like noodles or something like that is really nice. And then these Jetboils also have a little push button to ignite, which is really nice. You don't have to use like a lighter or anything. But there's a couple other fuel types. There's liquid fuel stoves. Those can be good if you're going to be in colder weather or at higher elevations. In those conditions, the gas canisters can sometimes depressurize depending on how cold it is or how high up you are. So they can be harder to use, but liquid fuel won't do that. And then alternate fuels, wood, denatured alcohol, and then they make like little solid fuel tablets that you can reuse, which is nice if you don't burn one completely. But with wood, you need it to be dry, of course. Denatured alcohol and tablets generally don't burn as hot, and so they can take longer to boil water and things like that. It's kind of cool though, the different features that they've put into the alternative fuel stoves. Like I saw at REI there was a wood stove that also had like little charging ports and things, which is kind of cool. And tent considerations, you want to think about the number of people that's going to be in it, how much room you want with that number of people. So Dave and I, even though there's only two of us, we usually take a 3-person tent just because we don't like being crammed in there like sardines. Seasonality, so 3 versus 4. Most tents are 3 season. 4 season would mean it'll hold up in really cold weather in the winter as well. I have hiked in our 3 season tent in like 20 degrees and been fine. The weight of it. So if you're really trying to pare down your weight, especially if you're doing like a through hike or something like that, you might want to consider paying a little bit more for a lighter tent. The different features. So they're like internal pockets are sometimes important. Sometimes there's a place to hang something from the top of your tent, like on the inside, like a headlamp. It can also, depending on how they're set up, that's something to consider. I have found that most tents that I've gotten that are just REI brand are really easy to set up. I've had the same one for years and it's not super light or anything, but it's been very durable. And I've lent it to friends who have had no camping experience whatsoever and they've had no issues setting it up, which can be an obstacle for some people with fancier kinds of tents. So it's just something to consider. And then some alternatives to tents, a hammock and a bivvy. I know some people who prefer to use a hammock just because they like the airflow. They think it's more comfortable. It's not always great if you don't know for sure there's going to be a place to hang it. And then you also might want like a bug net or something to accompany it. And then a bivy is basically just like a single person tent. It's basically the size of a sleeping bag with a little cover over. And those are super light, but not really very comfortable, I would say. And this is taken from a trip I took to the Adirondacks with some of my friends several years ago. My friend has the same REI tent that I did, but she forgot to bring her tent poles. So the four of us, it was four engineers, were trying to figure out how to set up the tent because it was supposed to rain that night and without tent poles, and making sure that the people inside would stay dry. So this is just a reminder to always remember your stakes, your tent poles, your rain fly, and your ground cover. So your stakes are going to be the little things in the corners that hold your tent down, especially important in windy conditions. Your ground cover goes underneath, and that's to keep the bottom of your tent dry. And then your rain fly, obviously, to keep the rain from getting inside your tent. And the poles, which would normally hold up your whole tent structure and the rain fly. Luckily, we made do with the rope that we had. Sleeping bags and liners. There's a couple different things to look for as far as temperature rating. There's a difference between the comfort temperature and the limit temperature. Generally, the comfort temperature is what's shown on women's specific bags. That's the temperature that a cold sleeper will be comfortable at in that bag. And then the limit is generally shown on men's sleeping bags. And that's just the temperature that a warm sleeper would be comfortable sleeping in that bag in. So I guess generally men just run warmer. So that's why they use that. I'm not exactly 100% sure of the logic, but just something to consider. And then your overall sleep system. When you're buying a sleeping bag, you also need to consider the pad that you have in the liner. So different kinds of pads will have better insulation than others and keep you warmer than others. And then the liner, which is basically just like in the shape of a sleeping bag, but it's just like a sheet material. And that just slips inside. That can add like 5 to 15 degrees. So if you have a 30-degree bag, but you have a 15-degree liner, you might actually be able to sleep comfortably in 15-degree weather. Insulation type. So there's basically down and synthetic. Down is generally more lightweight, compresses really well, and is extremely warm, but it is kind of expensive. And synthetic material, or synthetic down, basically, it holds up better if it's wet. Getting a down sleeping bag wet can be really, really bad for it. But getting a synthetic one wet isn't the end of the world, and you'll still be able to stay warm. It's less expensive because it's not real down, and generally more durable, I would say. And then the weight of the bag, again, if you're a weight weenie and you're trying to be really conscientious of how much you're packing, something to consider. A down bag is going to be lighter. The shape of it, they generally come in mummy or rectangular shapes. This image here is a rectangular shaped sleeping bag, but most backpacking bags will be a mummy shape. That just means they're tighter in the feet, and they generally have like a hood that goes around your head. If you don't like being like crammed in a little cocoon, you might want to look specifically for a rectangular bag. Generally, those are just going to be heavier. And then different features. So some sleeping bags specifically have like anti-snag zippers. Some will have like a little pocket up here to hold your pillow in place, which is kind of cool. And then you can also look at other alternatives like a quilt. That's basically just a blanket, a really lightweight blanket. Dave, my husband, runs very, very warm when he sleeps. He like cannot sleep in a sleeping bag, so he has just a pad. He sleeps in his liner, and then he just puts the quilt on top. And also one thing to consider with these, usually they'll come with, especially a down bag, but synthetic too, will come either with like a cotton bag or a mesh bag, and then also like a stuff sack. And the stuff sack is what you put your bag in when you're actually like out on the trail. But when you come home, you want to make sure you take it out and you put it in the mesh bag or the whatever other bigger bag it comes with. If you keep it in the stuff sack, it's just going to be really hard to, it won't last as long, and it won't keep you as warm because it's been compressed for so long. Shoe choice. This is really important. These are kind of the three main types. I tend to go with trail runners, which is kind of on one end of the spectrum, and then other people will go with hiking boots, which is on the other end. Hiking boots are generally more sturdy, more durable, but they are kind of heavy and clunky, and they do require a significant amount of break-in time. Hiking shoes are kind of in the middle. They do require the break-in time. They're a little bit heavier, but they're lighter than hiking boots, and they, I think, generally would be, well, they're more akin to like a regular sneaker, so they might be, you're more used to wearing something like that. Trail runners are really light. They dry really quickly. If I know I'm going to be doing a lot of stream crossings, I'm not worried about my feet staying wet for hours on end if I'm in trail runners. And the reason I wear trail runners is because years ago I bought a brand new pair, and then I went and did 20 miles of hiking the first time I wore them, which I would not recommend. It was not smart, but I was very fortunate. And though I have very finicky feet, I didn't have any issues with it. And after I had that experience, I just decided that those were the shoes for me, because if I could get through that, then they could do me no wrong. And they haven't, but they're not for everyone. They're not great on like really rocky terrain. Sometimes they can be hard on your feet because they don't have as sturdy of a sole. But I wear Salomon speed crosses. I've worn them on multi-day backpacking trips, trail running, all kinds of things, and they've been really great. Clothing. This is a big one. You obviously want to dress appropriate for the climate. So if you're going to be up at higher elevations, you need to think about the fact that it's going to be colder in the mornings and the evenings. You want to make sure that you're packing the necessities, everything you need, without packing too much. But you don't want to be uncomfortable. So that can kind of take some trial and error. Usually I'll end up packing my bag, realizing I have way too much stuff, like it barely fits or it's too heavy. And then I'll kind of run back through it and figure out, okay, what do I really need and what can I leave at home? You want breathable and quick dry fabrics. Most hiking specific clothes that you're going to get from like REI or somewhere like that, that's like REI brand, North Face, Patagonia, something like that, those are all going to be pretty good fabrics. You just don't want to wear like something that's going to really trap in your sweat, or not dry quickly, because that'll get uncomfortable very fast. You want to bring layers, even if you think it's going to be really warm. Always make sure you bring like a rain layer. I would always bring a long sleeve, especially if you're going to be up higher, or just generally in the mountains. And then emergency items. So think about bringing like a hat and gloves. If there's like any chance it's gonna get below 50 degrees, basically, I will always have a glove and hat with me, or if not a hat, at least a buff. This is generally what I would pack for a hiking outfit. This is not everything, but for a day of hiking, I would bring a pair of quick drying pants, especially if I love when they have lots of pockets to put things. You could wear shorts. I know sometimes if it's like really, really hot, it's hard to imagine wearing pants, but you need some awareness of where you're going, and just making sure, like if the trail isn't well maintained and it's really overgrown with poison ivy or poison oak, you don't want to be in a situation where your legs and your arms are completely bare and being exposed to this poisonous plant. I've been there. It's terrible. We'll never do it again. So I highly recommend bringing pants. Generally, I'll bring a moisture wicking t-shirt to wear as my base layer. If it's going to be really cold, I would bring long underwear, but I don't really hike in that cold of conditions. And I find that layering works for me. So I'll bring a t-shirt, and then I'll bring a long sleeve layer. This could just be a long sleeve shirt. It could be a quarter zip, which is usually what I bring. That's kind of like a medium material, not too light, but not too heavy. Or it could be like a fleece or something. And then over top of that, I'll have the option to put a puffy jacket. Most of my jackets are just synthetic down, and I still find that they pack up pretty small and they don't take up too much room in my backpack. But they're really nice to have, especially in the mornings and the evenings when it starts to get chilly, especially those higher elevations. And then even if there's no rain in the forecast, I always bring a rain jacket because you just never know when bad weather could roll in, and it will help keep the rest of your clothes dry, which is especially for a puffy jacket, and especially if you spent money on a real down jacket, you're going to want that rain cover if it does start to rain. And then for socks, those are something I tend to put more money into because I really just don't want to have feet problems because they're like the most important thing when you're backpacking, especially for a long trip. So I tend to buy merino wool socks. Usually at REI, there's like over by the shoes, there's a big bucket of socks that are like always on sale. And a lot of the times you can find merino wool socks in there. So I would just look there if your REI has one. Or if you have like socks that you know are comfortable, wear those. Just don't try to wear something new the first time you go out. And this is also very important. Talk a little bit about leave no trace and how to poop in the woods. The main rules are you need to be 200 feet from trails, campsites, and water. And that's just to make sure that we don't ruin the campsites. We are keeping the water sources clean. You'll find if you go to places that are heavily backpacked that there'll be like toilet paper just like basically at the campsite, and it just ruins the experience for everyone. So follow leave no trace, be a good steward, try to follow these rules as best you can. If you do have to go dig a hole, usually 4 inches by 6 to 8 inches is fine. It just has to be deep and wide enough to be able to fully bury. You can bring biodegradable toilet paper or regular toilet paper. If you do bring regular toilet paper, make sure you pack it out. If you bring biodegradable, make sure it's fully buried in the hole. And then depending on how fragile the ecosystem is, you may be required to pack out your waste. You may not be able to dig a hole. So always check whatever park you're going to, check their website, check their rules. Or if it's like Fish and Wildlife or U.S. Forest Service, whatever it is, make sure you check out that first before you go. And if you do have to have some sort of disposal bag or disposal system, make sure that you bring that with you. To actually follow these rules, you need to have a trowel to be able to dig. Toilet paper, of course, like I said, if it's non-biodegradable, you should pack it out. Sometimes even with biodegradable, you'll pack it out just to be on the safe side. And then hand sanitizer, which is just good to have anyways. And then the disposal bag, like I mentioned. All right, how to pack. Now that we've gone through all of the must-haves, this is kind of how I do it. You want to make a checklist. If you come on a trip with us with Blaze Adventure Tours, we will give you a gear list. And once you have that checklist, lay everything out so that you can see it all in like one picture. And after it's laid out, then go through your checklist and check things off. I would go through it twice to make sure you don't forget anything. And then I like to kind of compartmentalize my gear. So I'll put like my hiking clothes in one bag. I'll put my toiletries in a bag. I'll put my food in a bag, my camp clothes in a bag. And that way it's just really easy to grab what I need when I need it. And that can be in stuff sacks, dry bags, or you can even use like the big 2-gallon Ziploc bags. I've used those before. They work great. And just anything that you can compress and squeeze the air out of will be really helpful when you're actually packing up your full bag. You want to make sure you pack the least used items. So generally anything you're going to have at camp, like your tent, sleeping bag, pad, things like that will go on the bottom. Then in the middle, I'll generally try to put like my camp clothes, maybe my stove, my mess kit, something I'm not going to use again until I get back to camp. And then above that, any clothes that I might need, like layers that I might need throughout the day while I'm hiking. So a rain jacket, puffy jacket, and then food, map, maybe if I need that on top. And then anything I need often or quickly, I will put on the outside of my pack. So if you're paranoid and you want to put a knife there, I've been there. If you want like your camera, your phone, put those on the outside. Bear spray, snacks, things like that are all really good to put on the outside. Okay, so our next webinar, I hope I'll see some of you there. It's on June 13th, which I believe is also a Tuesday. It's going to be at the same time, 7 o'clock. But this one's going to be about how to fuel a backpacking trip. So it's going to be all about food. I think we're going to focus the first part on how to make sure you're packing enough food and how many calories kind of you want to plan for. Something we've found on trips that we've led is that people don't really realize how much food they need to bring, and they often are under fueled, and that can just ruin the trip, not only for you, but for everyone around you. So we like to make sure that you're eating enough and that you have food that you want to eat. That's the other big thing. Not everybody wants to eat a dehydrated meal every night of their trip. So we're going to try to go over some other options for you, things that you can buy like just from the store and put together, and then other things that you can kind of like mix at home and bring with you. I generally will carry a little bit more weight if it means I'm going to have a good meal, just because to me that's important, and I want to make sure that I'm eating enough, especially when you're hiking all day and you're burning all these calories. So this will be a really cool one to tune into. If you guys are free, please sign up through the link that Stephanie has sent or will send. And then before I wrap this up, I just wanted to do a quick slide on the backpacking trip that we're leading in September. I believe there are 3 of you signed up already, which is awesome. Because it is a backcountry trip, we are only limited to 8 people. That's 8 hikers plus myself and our other guide, Laurel, who will be joining us. She is a wilderness first responder, which is a requirement when you're leading trips in Shenandoah's backcountry. So she's a really cool person and great to have on the trip. She will save us if anything goes terribly wrong. And little details about the trip. It's just going to be one night, September 9th to 10th, and we're going to cover about 14 miles. The hiking days will be anywhere between 6 and 9 miles. I'm hoping for about 7 and 7. It just depends on what backcountry campsites are available when we get to that area. We're going to go up one of Shenandoah's lesser known peaks, which is really cool. It's very close to Old Rag, but it is not Old Rag. It has very similar views. It's not like crazy rock scrambling like Old Rag is. There's none of that. And we don't need a permit for it, which is nice, but it's also just not as many people know about it. And it's kind of a hidden gem in Shenandoah National Park. Gear rental is included with the cost of the trip. This includes your backpack, tent, sleeping bag, pad, liner, pillow, headlamp, things like that. 2 things that are not included will be water, bladder or bottles, however you choose to carry it. Those are just really hard for us to clean and then rent back out. So we just prefer that people bring their own. It's just kind of like a safety thing. And then trekking poles. So if that's something that you want to bring and you need recommendation, again, I recommend Trail Buddies, and we can help find those for you if you need them, or if you want to borrow some, we probably have extras somewhere laying around. So yeah, we really hope you guys can join us for this. It's going to be a really, really cool experience, and there's 5 spots left. So make sure you sign up if you want to go. And if there's enough interest, hopefully we'll do another one later this year. So any questions, please feel free to email me. My email is blazeadventuretours@gmail.com. You can also find me on Facebook. I'm part of the Girls Who Hike Virginia group. My name is Meredith Miller. can probably find me through that. Feel free to message me there. You can message us on Instagram at Blaze Adventure Tours. And this is our mascot Blaze here. These are the guys that I go hiking with every day almost. And this is our other dog, Trek. I think he feels a little bit left out because we started the company before we got him. So we need to figure out a way to include Trek in our company as well, but we're still working on that. Stephanie did send me a few questions that you guys had. So let me open those up. They looked like really good questions, and I might have touched on some of them. So the first one was about backpack fitting, tips for that. Like I said, I would recommend going to an REI in person if you can, or another camping store. I keep saying REI, but it doesn't have to be REI. And having somebody else fit you. If you can't do that and you want to buy it online, definitely read the product specifications, read those measurements, take a measuring tape, do the whole thing. I know it's annoying. I hate doing it for clothes. I don't like doing it for backpacks either, but it really does work and it makes a difference. And then if you can, try to load up your pack as best you can with the kind of gear that you're going to bring on your trip. Go out for just like a 1 or 2 mile walk and see how it feels, and adjust those load lifter straps, adjust the waist strap, adjust the chest strap to a point where it's comfortable for you. The big thing is you want to make sure that the pack is sitting on your hips and not your shoulders. That's going to prevent a lot of back issues and back pain. It's just going to be way more comfortable throughout. Your hips can take a much bigger load. And once you find that right fitting, you'll know it. It'll be comfortable. And you'll get used to it over time. And you'll learn to know how it feels and know what to look for and when you need to adjust. The next question was, I tend to overpack clothes. Any suggestions on how to curve what they normally bring, I guess. I kind of touched on this a little bit, but generally for myself, if I'm going on like a really any length backpacking trip, if it's just one night, I'll probably just bring one set of hiking clothes. If it's more than that, I'll probably bring 2 sets of hiking clothes. I'll have a set of clothes that I wear around camp, and then I'll have a set of clothes that I actually like sleep in. And then I'll have a set of camp shoes. And that's really it. It is kind of minimal. You could bring some additional clothes to wear around camp if you didn't want to wear the same thing every day. But I find like as long as I have the layers, I'll usually wear my hiking layers around camp. So even if I'm hiking in my puffy jacket, I'm going to wear that at camp too. I don't need an extra. But the base layers like a t-shirt and pants or shorts are going to be what I have at camp. And then, like I said, I'll usually pack everything up, realize it doesn't fit or it's too heavy, take it out and like really dwindle it down. And once you go, it does take it's kind of a learning curve. So once you do go out on 1 or 2 backpacking trips, you'll kind of figure out, oh, well, I didn't actually use this last time, so I'm not going to bring it again. And the next question is, I'd love to know about necessities. I've been slowly collecting gear. I'm also interested to hear about hygiene. Any tips for cleaning my hair or body while hiking? Those are great questions. Hygiene obviously is a little bit different in the backcountry. If it's just 1, maybe 2 nights, I'll kind of just rough it. I'll be kind of a scumbag. I won't really like take a shower or, try to, sometimes if it's like hot, I might get my hair wet in a stream or something like that, or try to rinse off. But you can bring like shower wipes. They do make biodegradable ones. Even still, I generally pack those out if I do bring them. And that's just like at the end of the day, you take a couple wipes, wipe down your whole body. It is really nice, especially if you're really hot and you've got like salt caked on all over you. Those are great to have. You can obviously, if you have a camp towel, go jump in a stream, try to rinse out your hair, rinse out your body. Just don't put any like soap or shampoo or anything in the water. You can bring Dr. Bronner's soaps, which come in like little travel bottles. Those are just like plant-based. They're not like full of chemicals or anything, but even still, I wouldn't recommend putting that in the water. You could just kind of put, if you have water with you in your pack, kind of use that and a little Dr. Bronner's in like a towel and just wipe down would be another option. And then for your hair, I just don't worry about it. For a really long trip, you could bring like a little travel canister of dry shampoo might work, or you could just, again, rinse it out in the stream. Just don't use shampoo because we don't want to pollute those waters or harm the animals in the stream. And then the other, also touching on that, if you're hiking, depending on where you're hiking, you may have the option to find showers. So if you're doing like a through hike of the AT just in Shenandoah National Park, for example, you'll be in the backcountry several nights, but there are established campgrounds along the way that have showers. So that is sometimes an option depending on where you're going. So you could bring like little travel bottles of shampoo and conditioner if you were going to use an actual shower. And then, which backpacks do you recommend for both overnight and day packs? So the one I showed you earlier was an Osprey 58 liter. The only thing I wish was different about that pack was that it had the waist pockets. It wasn't a deal breaker. I loved it. It was great. I did it. It was for 6 nights. You could definitely use it for less, maybe 1 or 2 nights more, but not too much more than that. We had pretty good access to towns on that trip, so I wasn't carrying like a crazy amount of food at any given point, which is why I think that 58 liter worked okay for me for that length of trip. And then the other one I used most recently on a longer trip, Dave and I went and did the Tour de Mont Blanc in the Alps last fall, end of summer, fall. And I used a 58 liter. It was an REI Traverse pack. That was both of those were women's specific packs. And that one I ordered online. I followed the specs and it worked out great. It fit me perfectly. I was able to adjust it to a really good spot. That one I used on a 7-day trip in the Alps, but that's because over there, you're not really allowed to backcountry camp. You have to stay in these, they call them refuges, depending on where you are. Refuges, refugios, auberge is what they're called. And they give you a roof, basically like a little bed. All you have to bring is a sleeping bag liner. They have blankets and pillows for you. And they feed you, so you don't really have to worry about like dinner and breakfast. So even though that was a 7-day trip, I only had a 32 liter pack. And it was pretty full, but I had basically the bare minimum, like just my clothes, toiletries, and some snacks. And that was, I think I said this already, the REI Traverse. And I find I love my Osprey pack, but I do feel like REI branded things are a more affordable price and they're basically the same thing. So you don't have to get one of the like fancy name brand packs to have a good time. And then for a day pack, I use another Osprey pack. It's, I think, 20 liters. It's just a little purple backpack. It's got it's got a spot for a water bladder. And then there's room for like a couple more bottles on the outside if I wanted them. And I can fit like all my emergency supplies, food, things like that, first aid kit. And then if I'm just going for like a longer, sometimes I'll kind of like fast pack where I kind of like half run, half hike. I will just bring like a running pack that I can fit 2 liters of water in and like all the emergency essentials. And sometimes that works great too. So I wouldn't do that obviously if I was like backpacking and camping somewhere and I needed more supplies, but just for like a quick all day hike, that's nice to have. And it's lightweight and it fits really well because it's meant for running. So that can be really comfortable if you don't need too much stuff. So I think that covers all of the questions that Stephanie sent. I hope you guys enjoyed this presentation. And I'm sorry I didn't record the first one, but there weren't too many other questions. I think the only other one was about the gear for the backpacking trip. So the gear is included in the price. If you do want to bring your own gear, that's totally fine. Unfortunately, there's no like discount for that as part of the price, but we have all the gear for you that you will need besides the water bladder, food, and the trekking poles. So if you do want to bring your own gear, that's totally fine. As far as like stoves go, and mess kits, we'll have enough for everyone to be able to cook a meal if they want. We have several stoves, and between Laurel, the other guide, and I will be able to make sure you're all fed. So you don't need to worry about bringing anything like that. And we won't make you individually each carry your own stove because it's not really necessary. And I think that was it. If you guys have any questions at all, again, please don't hesitate to reach out to me on email, Facebook, social media, whatever you want to do. I'm here for you, and I really am hoping I'll get to meet some of you in September, and hopefully at maybe some other hikes in the future. So again, please feel free to reach out. I will go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and I'll talk to you guys soon. I hope you have a great one. See ya.